Welcome to Women of the World, a show which gives a voice to women from around the world who have chosen to make the United States their home. Here's today's moderator, Makena.
Hello everyone, welcome to the Women of the World show. My name is Makena and I'm an author. I'm accompanied by two wonderful co-hosts. Starting from the left, if you'd please introduce yourself.
Hi, I am Amalia Moreno-Damgaard. It's a pleasure to be here with you today. Anne?
Thanks for being here. And to the right.
And I'm Nadia Jordana, and I'm delighted to be here with you all today.
Thank you. Welcome. And now, I have the pleasure to introduce the guest to the show. Her name is Sharon Bloodworth. Sharon is the president of White Oak Advisor Incorporation. She has been with that company since 2001, and she has lived in many countries. So welcome to the show, Sharon.
Thank you very much. I very much appreciate being here.
Welcome, thank you. Now, before we go very far, I was very curious about all the countries that you have lived in. You have lived in Indonesia, in Africa, you have also lived in Italy and in France. Would you share with us a little bit about the experience of living in these various countries and what made you choose United States for your home?
Well, I was born in Wales, and my dad worked in an American oil company, which really meant that we moved countries every couple of years. So, from when I was 6, we moved to Zaire in Africa, now known as the Congo. Moved to Houston, Texas for a couple of years, which was fabulous, and then on to Indonesia, then back to college, and France and Italy, and then I travel extensively. It was a very diverse and amazing upbringing. I had a lot of unique experiences there. I sort of share with many people that I grew up having malaria, but I haven't had chickenpox or measles or any of the sort of the more European type diseases. But if I had to pick a favorite, which is really hard, I would probably actually say the US, because this truly is the land of opportunity, and the harder you work, the more you achieve here. There's no class system here. It's literally all about how hard you work, and as long as you have a good education.
It's nice to hear that, because I think sometimes as Americans we lose sight of that. We take it for granted. It's nice to hear someone who's been to many other countries and says, we still have it pretty good here.
Oh, you definitely have it amazing here. Just from the healthcare, the access to education, and the sort of the entertainment media, the fact there's a free press, is certainly not an expectation around the world.
It's certainly great to have had the opportunity to live all over the world, because you picked up not only languages but culture along the way, and then you are living in the greatest country on earth. So how do you apply all that experience here in Minnesota?
Oh, good gracious. Well, I love Minnesota, and I think that having lived in so many countries and going through those experiences, you're very grateful for what you have, because I learned at a very young age in Africa that education is not a guarantee, health is not a guarantee, even access to clean water. The funniest thing is I'm more comfortable drinking soda than water, because most of the places I've lived, the water kills you. And so, that's very poor, poor for my health. No, I think it's, living in the States is just really wonderful. I'm very happy that I'm here. And I always wanted to live here. I went to a lot of American schools growing up, and when it came to university, at that point, back in the 90s, it was free in the UK, so the British government paid for all of your higher education. But I always wanted to go to an American college. I'd seen Animal House. It looked a lot more exciting here than it did in the UK. But my dad said, no, this one's free, that one's not. So I knew at some point I'd work my way back here. So I was very lucky post-college to have had an opportunity to come through the Mountbatten program to learn about American finance in New York City. And that was just unbelievable. They literally called me, and I had about 2 weeks to move. And I said to my mother, it's only 1 year, I'll be back. And she said, you won't be back. And no, I haven't gone back. And that was 1993.
So tell us, with the White Oaks Advisor Incorporated,
Yes.
you are the president
Correct.
of that company.
Yes.
Would you tell us some of what has led to your success, coming from being an immigrant to being the president of an extremely prestigious company? What led to that success? What were some of the things that you applied to lead you?
I like to think it was an awful lot of luck. It was hard work. It was being in the right place with the right people. And it's learning well to get on with others and understand sort of what they need from you as well. It was never my intention to go into finance. It sounded very boring. And when I was a child, I fancied advertising or using my languages, you're working for the airports or the airlines. But I had a rude awakening when I finished college, was that in the UK, far fewer people go to university than they do here. And back when my father went, there were even fewer. And when he graduated, all the employers were lined up and he could take the pick of where he wanted to go. So when it was my turn to graduate, I assumed the same thing would happen. And I graduated when there was a graduate recession. And I thought, that it was my first hard lesson in life where I realized, no, you just don't walk into sort of an industry. So I was very lucky to find the internship, which was done with Oxford University. So you came over here, worked in a firm in New York, did your studies at night, and then went back to apply it in British industry. And it was luck of the draw that I got finance, because there were many other companies in New York City that we were assigned to. And I remember the phone call, and I have 3 lucky bobs in my life, and this was my first lucky bob. So he called from the American firm and said, do you know anything about American finance? And I said, no, nothing, but I'm willing to learn. And he said, can you be here in a week? And I said, well, can I have 2? And that started it. And what I learned was that finance, it sounds very complicated, very complex, but it's really not. It's about helping people, and that I'm good at. And so from there, I worked for that firm for 5 years, and within about 4 years or so, I was looking after about $2 billion in client service, and it was because it was a bond recession at the time, and they always thought the British accent sort of apologised a bit better. I said, I'm very sorry, because that was a time when we were coming off huge interest rates from the 1980s, where you had huge bond coupons, and then into the 1990s when it changed dramatically. So I think my accent helped me, to be honest. So the fact that I was an immigrant was actually an advantage for me.
And your accent is beautiful.
Oh,
it's
thank
true.
you.
But I went to look at your website, the White Oaks Advisor Company. And like you said, you thought it was boring. But when I went through your website, I found some really interesting things that just sparked a lot of curiosity and interest. And I found out too that you were interviewed by the Forbes.
Correct, yes. Yes, I have an article on the Forbes website as well, yes.
Tell us a little bit about that experience. And there were 3 things that you talked about that helps with financial and wealth management.
Yes. So the Forbes request was for an article on helping millennials and what advice you would give to them to be most successful. My firm is, there are 2 firms actually, White Oaks Wealth Advisors and White Oaks Investment Management. And most people haven't heard of us at all, because we look after almost exclusively millionaires and multimillionaires. But my interest in sort of what I've learned from that is to help educate others on actually how you get there. Because I've seen the incredible positive financial behaviors and also the negative ones that don't help us get there. So if you can start early with millennials and help them understand how important it is to save, because American society is really set up to overspend. You want to get the largest house, the fastest car, the best vacations, but when you really look at what people earn, it doesn't make any sense from a financial perspective. When I look at all of my clients, very few live in very fancy houses. They drive up in very ordinary cars, and so that the real key to real wealth, if you haven't inherited it, or it's not part of a sort of a company having gone public, then it's down to living well below your means. And most people, when they start conservative, they end up fairly conservative long term as well.
Yeah, I found that to be very helpful. And like you said, the first two are out of your control, but how you spend makes such a big difference in your finances.
Yeah.
What kind of advices would you give to the immigrants, especially the people that are coming to United States? They don't know where to start, how to start. Do you have any advice for them on how to build up into financial success and stability?
Well, the advice I think I would apply was just what I'd experienced coming here sort of 25 odd years ago, is that America is built on credit.
Yeah.
And so being able to establish a credit history first is very important. Nobody will, you can't get into a house, it's very hard to get into a car. So generally having a credit card, and usually the first one that people will give you is one that is sort of there's some security backed. So for example, if you have $300 in the bank, they'll give you one for $300 so that they know it's not taking much of a risk. And so for that, you just have to build up a credit history for about 3 to 5 years. And that's the most important thing. The other thing that I think is quite difficult for immigrants coming in, and especially myself, in the UK, when you work, unless you're a corporate director, if you're working a regular job, then your employer takes your taxes from you, from your payroll, and you don't file anything. Whereas in America, everyone's expected to file your taxes. And so being able to understand that sort of the financial system very quickly and what's required here, because you want to make sure, again, you're filing your taxes properly, and that you're really being able to pay into Social Security as quickly as you can, because if you're going to stay here, then being able to access Social Security in your retirement and Medicare when you're retired is very important. And so again, if you don't get on the system, then that can be a very negative thing. The other advice I would give is find your local community as fast as possible. It's all about networking, I think, is a success to really doing well in another country. So again, if you've come over from Somalia, finding your local Somali community that's really going to help you integrate very quickly, and usually all of the financial resources are right there. So a lot of the banks that are in sort of in neighbourhood communities sort of make it very easy for people to sort of onboard here. But as I said again, it's really credit is the key. Unless you're independently wealthy, so you have money and you don't need to worry about sort of borrowing for a car or borrowing for a house, then credit is absolutely key. And if you make one late payment, it stays with you for about 7 years. And you'd be surprised how much your credit score drops just with one bad payment. And so understanding that is key. And that applies to college students as well, is that a lot of immigrants come over via college, and when they offer your first credit card, say yes, but be really responsible with it, because you want it just for the credit history. I hardly advocate using credit cards a lot, but it's vital to build history.
Use it, but in moderation.
And pay it off.
And build up and pay it off quickly.
And always pay it off on time. So my daughter is, she's 18. She's had a credit card for a while, again, doesn't really use it as a credit card, but just puts a couple of things on it, pays it off to build the credit history. So as soon as she's out of college, she could go straight into a home if she wanted to with that first job. Otherwise, you're waiting another 5 years to build it up. So.
Great advice.
Oh, thank you.
So you have this tremendous financial background, and I heard you say earlier that you do what you do because you like to help people.
Oh, yes.
And I saw you in your background that you are involved with the Rotary as well.
Yes.
Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Well, I really love Rotary. It's an international organization. We're best known for reducing polio around the world. There are 1.2 million Rotarians, 34,000 clubs, and the 9th club ever formed is here in Minneapolis. Number 1 was Chicago. And I was lucky enough to be president of that club about 4 years ago. They called me Queen. I much preferred that to president and preferred a lot more power. And it's really amazing. And for me, because I was a transplant here, it's belonging to a big organization, so you understand sort of who's in the community and what's happening. And it was a very good fit for me because it gave me something to do during the day. that it was community service because I had a young child at the time, so it allowed me to do something during the day so I wouldn't take away from family time, but that really sort of builds your energy, and it's very fun. I've done a lot of international projects in Indonesia. Right now I'm working on one in Tanzania, and then going back to Indonesia, hopefully working with the Red Cross and immunizing children for measles over there. So I love to do that, and it gives me a connection back to the countries that I've come from, and we meet as a group internationally once a year, so there are about 34,000 people that get together for international conventions, and being in a room with 34,000 people that are looking to improve the world, it's so uplifting. It's absolutely,
I can
I'd highly
imagine.
recommend it to everybody.
Yeah.
Wow, when do you have time to do all this? That's wonderful.
Well, I was once interviewed by the Carlson School for a study they were doing on balance with successful people. Do I have a good work-home balance? I have no balance. And I felt, and they said, what's the longest you go without checking your phone or looking at your phone? I was like, well, why wouldn't I want to check it? I mean, there might be a client issue that's going on or something else. So I've learned that I have no balance. But that I have terrific energy. Life is too short not to do everything. So in addition to doing Rotary, I also belong to a peer-to-peer CEO group called Vistage and arrange an award program with them. For Rotary, I'm arranging a district conference, which is probably bring about 500 people together next year. I just can't help myself. I'm very bad at saying no, because I always have what's called FOMO, fear of missing out. So I always need to be in the thick of things. So.
What is the conference that you mentioned?
So for Rotary, the 63 clubs in Minnesota all get together every year and do that. So I was conference chair 3 years ago, and so now I'm doing the one again in 2018, which is really thrilling. So we're trying to pull in some very significant women to the conference, because the local goal is actually to increase women from 30% in Rotary in Minnesota to 50.3, and that's a huge difference, and that's in a 3-year period of time. So we're trying to recruit a lot of women into the conference to really talk about the benefits of having us involved.
And taking advantage of the trends, right?
Exactly.
So tell us a little bit about your family
Yes.
and the things you do when you're not working.
Which is not often. So I have a beautiful 18-year-old daughter called Sophia that goes to the University of Minnesota, and a fabulous husband that we married 5 years ago in New York City. It was much easier to marry there because it's very easy to travel to New York. I had a friend come from Australia for the weekend, which was really lovely. And because I only had one child, I had to, I married early when I came here and then divorced, so I was a single mother for many years. And so I had to throw myself into my work, which is probably one of the reasons where I am today, because I just worked so hard for the both of us. But because I only had one child, which was my greatest regret because I love children, I filled it with animals. So, I have a beautiful corgi, and who's a rescue. My other Scotty died just before Christmas, and then a couple of cats as well. So I pour all of my efforts into my animals. So
A house full.
And you reside here in the United States most of the time now, is that correct?
Yes, I'm pretty much exclusively here. I do a lot of traveling around the country to visit with clients.
It sounds like, yeah.
And then since my mum turned 70, all of us siblings get together and go to some European capital and spend a week together, and to create new memories with families, because as immigrants you often leave everybody behind.
Yes.
And all of my family are in the UK, and my dad still works in Indonesia. So for me it's a way to sort of keep together.
I love the idea of actively creating memories.
Yes.
Great idea.
That's a great
Yeah.
idea.
And the phones are so cheap. I remember 20 years ago when I would call my grandmother and she would say, oh, it's so expensive, you're calling from America. And now it's so cheap.
Yeah, it's very easy.
So I actually talk to my mother for 40 minutes every day, which is far more than all of my siblings who live very close to her do. So I don't feel that I miss out as much, which is nice.
So with your companies, just going back to the financial advisor,
Yes.
you have your office in Minnesota and then in Florida.
Correct.
So is that's part of the reason you have to travel? Because I noticed you work with clients from all over the world.
Oh yes, no, we have onshore funds and offshore funds, so we have the ability to work internationally as well. Most of our clients start in Minnesota, but end up in sort of along the coast. Often when, as they age, they're looking for a bit more warmth.
Yes.
I love it here because most of my childhood was in the tropics, so it's either hot season or rainy season.
Yeah.
So I love to see the seasons change, but sometimes when you've been here for too long,
Yes.
other people look for
We know.
for a bit of sun. No, but it's also a global world from an investing perspective, is that when you look at most countries as they age, their economies become much larger and it's much harder to move them forward faster. So back when the UK used to be the economic centre of the world, the US was the wild, wild west, and the thought of investing here would be very risky. Whereas now here, I think what most people don't realise is that the US is now that very large old economy, and it's important to look elsewhere if you want to continue to have the sort of returns that people have enjoyed sort of over the last 50 years.
It's amazing. So I have couple other questions. For the people that are in big debts, first of all, are there some good debt? And what would that be? And then the people that are in debt, do you have any advice on how to work your way out of the debt?
Yes. There are some good debts, but it varies by person. So we all have different money personalities.
Okay.
So for example, if you're a saver and you're a spender, then if you have debt, that's fine for you, because I know that you'll save the difference. But if you would spend everything, well then you're better off, not having the debt and sort of paying it down much faster. So people look at probably the most common question I get is, should I have a 15-year mortgage or a 30-year? So in the 15-year you pay down much faster than the 30. But if your 30-year mortgage is a very low rate, then you think, well, that's a great decision if you're going to save the difference that it would have cost you for the 15. Now, for example, in my example before, if you're the saver and you save the difference, then you're ahead. But if you're spending the difference, then you would have been better off with the 15.
Boy, does that make sense.
And that's why the Obama
That's
administration
amazing.
had a huge push for telling people to get 15-year mortgages. And it's not that they're better than the 30, but most people don't save. So from a debt perspective, being able to borrow at very low interest rates is attractive if you're also a saver. Otherwise, you're better off you're paying things down as quickly as you can. But as the answer for big debt is very, very simple. First of all, you just take down the debt that has the highest interest rates. That just makes the most sense. So if you've got a credit card that you're having to pay 18%, and you'd be surprised how quickly you get to an 18% credit card. If you have a couple of late payments, they automatically raise you to those horrific rates. So paying those down quickly. So I would go down in that order. Just in terms of sort of what's sensible, but then also sort of thinking about what you spend as well. So most people run off and buy their coffee that costs $4 a day and spend things on eating out and restaurants. So looking at where your money's going in the first place. If you look at people who are very successful from a saving perspective, or that have very little debt, they don't waste an awful lot of money. There's no good reason why you can't cut coupons and be very practical in your spending. And most people don't, so it gives you a great advantage to be able to do that.
Don't you think that that is cultural, like many other habits, credit habits, financial habits? I know from Latin America, those habits are almost non-existent. So they tend to be cash societies, right? In the U.S., spending is rampant, but saving is a problem.
Yes.
How do you change the mentality when you are fighting against the current in terms of culture?
Well, that's a very good point. Because not only are Americans spenders by nature, they're actually spenders of other people's money because it's all done on credit. Which is even worse because then you're leveraging your debt. What I say is that when you look at China, the average Chinese person saves 50% of their income. 50% goes out.
Wow.
And so what I advise clients or children of clients is to have a couple of different checking accounts. So you have your money from your work put into your checking account, and one is for the absolute fixed expenses. So it's your mortgage or perhaps your car, and so that's what you absolutely have to pay. The second one, the savings go straight off the top, so if you, because you really want to pay yourself first. And the third one is the disposable income, and then that helps you see exactly how much you have a choice about saving or spending, and that's really important. So when I look at my salary, by the time, even though I'm president of 2 companies, by the time I look at my salary at the end of the day, the only account I really look at is the disposable income one, and I'm effectively paid, no different than a receptionist would be paid, because everything has gone, everything has gone into savings and then off to dispose. And so it gives you a different perspective. Whereas if you see your big salary check sitting in your bank account, well, you get too excited about spending it. You see a trip or something else you want to go on, and you just don't have that discipline. So part of it is really forcing yourself into the discipline, which is just taking the money off of the top of the salary. And most people say, well, you should save about 10%. I say 20. And I would love, in an ideal world, it would be like the Chinese, and you'd say 50, and then you'd have a lot of flexibility and a lot of opportunity. But 20% is really the minimum. And if you say I can't, well, then you won't be able to retire. So it's time to change what you have now. Or if you really, really can't, then the next time you have a raise, don't spend it. Then put all of that into savings so that you can sort of get yourself into a better position long term.
I like the idea of having 2 accounts, the 2 checking accounts. That's a bright idea.
Yes.
And well, we're running out of time. So before we end the show, where can our viewers find information about you and about what would be helpful?
Oh, yes. So thank you very much. Our website is www.whiteoakswealth.com. So you can go on our website, and we put out a lot of information as well. I'm also a big advocate for NAPFA.org, which is the National Association of Financial Planners, and those are fee only, so they give you advice, they don't sell you products. That's the purest opportunity you can have to find sort of good financial advice out there. And then probably the Financial Planning Association as well. Is where you get the purest information, because you always have to think about who's putting the information out and what they're trying to sell. So I always like to go to kind of source information.
Well, thank you very much for coming to the show and for giving us such bright ideas about finances.
Oh, thank
It
you
was
so
a pleasure meeting you.
Oh,
Yeah.
thank you. It goes so
Thank you.
quickly.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
And thank you to my co-hosts today, and thank you to our viewers, and hope to see you next time at Women of the World Show.